What is up, creators? Welcome back to the Video Simplified podcast with your hostess, the mostess, Diana Gladney. Today is quite the interesting episode as we step away from our usual video tips and things like that to step a little bit more into the creator mindset and just some of the situations that you may encounter as a creator and what that looks like for you, even if you're an entrepreneur or even if this is a hobby or whatever the case is, and using and leveraging the whole scenario around what happened with Will Smith, Chris Rock, and quote unquote, the slap. Like, it's serious business out here in these streets. And I've talked with some creator friends about this and have my own thoughts and things like that. And I definitely wanted to be very mindful of this conversation because I think it's something that's important that needs to be talked and thought about, especially being someone that is primarily a Black female in the tech space, which there's not a ton of us. And so you get put on not necessarily a pedestal to an extent, but you get elevated to a higher standing in certain environments and communities and things like that because it's just not a lot of us. And so when that happens, we have to hold ourselves accountable for certain things, be very mindful of how we behave. And then of course there's just the whole conversation about being a Black woman in media or in tech or women in tech in general. But then again, you add that other cap on top of that lid that you have to break through those invisible ceilings. It's like in glass ceiling after glass ceiling of being a woman that's Black, and you're a woman that's Black, and you're in the tech space, right? So there's that, and there's a lot to unpack here. So I have a couple things, I have a little post-it notes to try to keep me on cue for just different things I want to cover across this conversation, because I think it's something we need to be mindful of and thinking of whoever you are, wherever you are, and even for whose steps are going to be following you when you're making strides and trying to do things in your niche, in your industry. And it sometimes it feels like because it's YouTube, quote unquote YouTube, people don't think like it's that big of a deal, but you are building a brand, you're building a media empire. And because of that, people sometimes come into this thinking a little too lax in some scenarios. And then again, you just have somebody like myself and others of other peers of mine that we don't have that luxury to behave in a certain kind of way. So this whole issue with Will Smith and this thing with Chris Rock, and I mean, if you've seen the clip, you've seen the clip. I'm not going to play it back here, but it's a very powerful moment for a lot of different reasons and all the things that happened there afterwards. And I'm very, very interested and curious of your thoughts. I'm going to put a link in the description where you can leave a audio message. Maybe we'll touch back on those, play those on the next episode if we continue this conversation. But I'm very, very curious to hear your thoughts. And I know some people are feeling one way or the other. So if to catch you up to speed, if you're like me, maybe was watching something completely different and don't care about these award ceremonies and things like that. What happened is, so you have, everybody knows Will and Jada Smith. Everybody knows that they have a very public relationship in the sense of their marriage and the things that I think are private scenarios, private instances, or at least should be, or you would think would be between a husband and wife, are very public. Okay, well, that being the case, on the top of them being celebrities, and I would say like super mega stars in the sense of the celebrity scope, they're always in the media. They're always getting talked about. They're always like up there, right? In the top of mind conversations. Well, we all are aware that Jada had her entanglement situation where there's an open relationship that I think just got a little too open, but I don't think that was probably out of the norm for maybe either one of them, or maybe with Jada in different instances or whatever. That being the case, Jada Pinkett Smith talks a lot about her different thoughts. She brings a lot of tough conversations on her Red Table Talk show that premieres on Facebook Watch. And because of this, conversations she's been able to open up and dialogue and have these really interesting conversations with herself, her daughter, her mother, other people, her family, like friends, colleagues, whatever, you name it, it's happening at that Red Table Talk in a very good way, I think. And one of those conversations is her battle with alopecia, which I would encourage you to look it up. And most people know somebody that's dealing with this, and maybe you're aware, and sometimes maybe you're not aware, because people at first are they're challenged with hiding it. They're challenged with figuring out how they want to deal with it. And so they don't, think anything about it. They think, oh, the thin eyebrow comments, no big deal, or you losing your hair thinning or whatever, until it gets to the point there's like, they got to make a decision. Am I going to shave my hair off because it's pretty much gone, or I'm balding, or in certain areas I'm balding, or I don't have eyebrows, or I don't have sideburns, and just, the whole thing. Psychologically, for her, and I know for a lot of other women and then friends that I have that are challenged with this, psychologically, it's a lot to deal with, even to the point of getting out of the house, because it's like, how do I want to look and present myself to show up and like just to get to the grocery store, or, what I'm saying, just to go out on an outing with your kids, or, whatever, and then get to a point to where you're comfortable in your own skin. And then somebody that deals with stage 4 endometriosis and the challenges that come with that, and the thoughts of, are you good enough? Are you a full and complete woman? Are you going to have these opportunities removed or taken away? Or how do you engage with certain like, it's a whole second layer of thinking that you have to think about that other people don't have to think about. Now, you would imagine that a public figure like a Jada Pinkett Smith or whatever is strong enough to deal with it. Or you make enough money, you can pay for a therapist, kind of stuff, or the kinds of things that people hear. But the average everyday Joe Schmo, right, or Jane and Joe or whomever, it's like, it's a different conversation, or people maybe at times are a little bit more empathetic sometimes. And so that brings me to like my first area of wanting to talk about this, which is Black women and Black hair in media as a basis of the conversation, because for a very long time, how you had to show up and what was considered acceptable. And we're still having these conversations. These are not like super old from 40, 50 years ago. These are like right now conversations, to the point to where even a hairstyle like mine being considered enough to not be quote unquote professional enough to get the job at a corporate office, or to be considered, or it's considered dirty, or too ethnically wild, or, just like all of these different aversions to why you're not qualified. It's just one other thing. Myself, other women, many other women, that if you were not mixed, if you did not have some other kind of heritage that made your hair texture different, and to a point that was more pleasing and more of a fine like quality, it was not considered good hair. Because of this, how you show up matters. And like, this is so present for me, because as a person, not just of color, but like as a Black woman, when I was first thinking to make a YouTube channel, my first questions was like, who do I have to be on the platform? How do I have to show up? And when I have these very intimate conversations on interviews, and we bring, or not even we, when they ask me those things, like they'll ask even like before, are you okay if I ask you this? Is this going too far? And I'm like, I'm an open book at this point, because I've been through a lot. And I think it's important to open the door for these conversations, so people can know, one, you're not by yourself in thinking about some of these things, but also like where I stand on certain issues. Because just somebody to say, like, I'm not going through it by myself, having that community aspect in like your weak and low moments and weak states of mind, I think is very important. So when I started this channel, not this one initially where this podcast is posting, but when I first started my main YouTube channel, that was my thing. Like, do I have to dress up in suits? Do I have to wear blouses all the time? Do I have to wait until my hair is relaxed? What about my acne and the hyperpigmentation issues? And what about weight gain? What about all of these things? What about when I just I am very challenged medically with the endometriosis stuff, and I don't feel well. Like I had a myriad of thoughts and things that I had to find workarounds, situations and scenarios of how I deal with things personally that I still use to today. And it's just really in like the recent years of letting some of those things go, of deciding and coming to a point of, you know what, I'm done playing the corporate game, or I'm done playing the things that have always been socially acceptable to make others feel more comfortable, and presenting yourself in an inauthentic way to yourself. And so that was when I got to a point of like, okay, I do want to play hip hop or trap or classical or rap or rock and roll or whatever kind of music that I prefer, because I'm very musically diverse. But if I want to play hip hop, like I thought about what kind of music can I play? Is it considered ghetto if I play like trap or hip hop or something like that? Is it going to be seen as not good enough? And there's still, that's why you even have like the hashtag YouTube Black, where it's still conversations around why it takes some of us longer to hit certain levels, whereas other counterparts not so much. And it's not something to be said like just win because you're a certain skin color or not, but it's like for a lot of people that is something there. It's been something there for a really long time. So when you think about how do I need to show up to be acceptable, like Black women, black hair has been a thing. So like I said, it's a lot underneath a simple snippet of an award show that honestly, like, we get it. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot. It's so many things. It was a podcast episode that I did, and that episode, I talked about like the whole thing with the George Floyd or whatever. And I got to a point I was so volatile on the inside, it felt like a volcano. And I remember not being able to fully express myself to my friend at that time, because I literally would tell her, I feel like there's a volcano on the inside of me, and I don't want to say anything to you because if I do, you gonna get lava. And it's not fair for you to catch that lava. So just please let me be until I can, you know what I'm saying, go through this and experience this. And it got to a point, and I'm like, and I'm supposed to keep creating content. It's supposed to keep being cool in a moment where it's like, I cannot put on a front right now. Like, I'm bothered in a way that at my core rocks me. This kind of brings up a situation where it's another one of those things. To a lot of people, they just thinking like, oh, the slap, no big deal, or it's disrespectful, it's assault, blah, 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 or he's standing up for his man or a woman and spouse and all of that. That's a factor. But for her, for Jada, and I'm not condoning any things that she's done previously, I'm just trying to stay at base level with where we're at this point with the hair situation. Your hair means a lot to you, and it does have some level of impacting your identity. And I would say more so, and I'll say not even more so, but a lot for women. I'll put it that way, a lot for women. So that being the case, and her having and being seen as like a beauty figure for a long time, even if you're not, how you see yourself and how you accept yourself matters. So to have somebody kind of attack at the jugular a little bit to something that's already a tender subject is a problem. And then historically, we know, and I'm not saying from the history of time, I'm saying within our lifetimes, within my lifetime, situations and stuff that's happened in corporate America, at certain churches, at certain events and stuff like that, things that are said, and you just sit there and you just like, and you gotta grin and bear it. Truly, you know what I'm saying? It's the hallmark of, I feel like sometimes being a Black woman and you get put into like a spotlight or something, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta find your face. You gotta find that face of, like, I'm like, on the inside is a whole other conversation going on, but on your face, it's like, and what's interesting is we saw that not that long ago with a certain United States court situation, I'll put it that way, So there's that aspect of her dealing with the alopecia. I'm sure some of that kind of gut check being like a, not even a gut check, but just like a being a punch at the jugular at a, you know what I'm saying? Like at something that's tender, how you see yourself, how you value yourself. The other thing is the whole thing around, was Will Smith justified by slapping him, being Chris Brown, and then afterward verbally yelling at him, keep my wife's name out your mouth. Now, this is where I think we level over into branding and yourself and your entity as a brand, because we got a lot of sides of and aspects of how you deal with this, from Chris Rock's aspect, which I think handled this the best, in the sense of he already knows how he's seen in the black community. That is a whole other conversation, but you can probably research that or see that around. TikTok's a good place to get a lot of grumblings of what people's thoughts are or whatever, or go look at YouTube even. And there's a lot, like from a lot of demographical age group standpoint. Historically, though, there's always been grumblings in like a 60-40, 50-50 split on how people feel, love him or hate him, with Chris Rock, especially in the black community. But when it comes to like a branding thing, it's like when you are attacked and something is said negatively to you, and this is specifically key when you are a creator just in general on YouTube, and it comes to your brand, do you say something, yes or no? How well do you say something back, or how deep do you go down the rabbit hole? Some people are of the school of thought to say, let it wash off, like be like water off a duck's back. Don't let it impact you. But there are some things that just does. It just does. It bothers you. You hate it. It does hit you at the jugular. It does feel some kind of way. You know what I'm saying? Like it does hurt. It did cut a little deep. So when you're looking at your brand, let's talk about Chris Rock, because he's probably the easiest to talk about to start with in some extent. Did he say something? And everybody goes to the thing like, well, he's a comedian. And like, you have to think, like, I'm thinking about this as a creator, as an entrepreneur. You are working so gosh darn hard to build your brand. When do you let something take you out of your normal character of what people see on the outside, and you're responding in a very human-like way to address it? So we have these events, we go to conferences, stuff like Vid Summit, Podfest, all this, whatever. There's always like panels, and I think the gap between what we see is like mainstream media and social media at some point is having like a convergence, and you'll see personalities, entities on both sides at either one or events, and I think at some point it's gonna mesh. So now you open yourself up to a different kind of a media. It's just not your family, friends, and your tribe on social media. It's like Forbes and NBC and all this whatever, because it's a big deal when you get hit and put into one of these publications. I know. Like, it's a big deal when you start to get to the higher tiers of different things, right? That being the case, for Chris Rock's brand, I think, one, it's like him as a comedian, you're going to say stuff that's going to offend people. And they'll be like, oh, have tough skin, blah, blah, blah. It's like, and it, you know what, growing up with Gen X and some millennial, maybe a couple, but like mostly like Gen X siblings, and then having boomer parents and like all these cousins that's like Gen X, and then like, you know, great aunties and stuff that's boomers and beyond, you know, just like so much of that, like growing up was defend yourself, protect yourself, let nobody punk you kind of a stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it, all the, you know what I'm saying? Like that mentality of, again, protecting yourself, but also knowing how to carry yourself. Don't embarrass the family. Don't do certain things, blah, blah, blah. So Chris Rock as a comedian, somebody saying something like that to us growing up would be suck it up kind of a thing to an extent. And that's not saying anything about my family or whatever, because I mean, me being me, it's like one of those things. It's like you cracking jokes a lot. You get used to even the things that cut a little too deep. It's like, you know what I'm saying? You got to decide in that moment. Am I going to respond to this or am I not? So Chris Rock saying what he said. Yes, it's offensive. Yes, I think it was a below the belt hit. But you kind of learn to deal with it, unfortunately. Now, after he's been hit, now it's like, do you still keep the same thing of it was just a joke, no big deal? I think he carried himself very well. I think in the sliver of an opening that he saw and peeked through the door, like, ooh, I could just, and like, oh, I could say something. Oh, I could say something. You know what I'm saying? I could go to town, material for days that probably will come out eventually on radio shows and interviews, because you know they're coming. It's just like, oh, I could say something, but it's like, you know what? I'm going to let it go. And moved on. So respect and props to him, because it's not always easy to contain yourself in a moment where you kind of put on the spot of, you know, figuring out how you want to respond. Jada handled it expectedly how you would expect anybody to handle it, in the sense of the look of disapproval and annoyance and frustration. I think that is what most of everybody expected. Anybody else that didn't laugh, if you disagree, don't laugh or sit in silence in your disagreement. But when it moves to Will now, and he initially laughed. I don't think it was like he thought it was funny, and it would have been funny if Jada thought it was funny. I think it was one of those things like that conversation had been happening at home for a while, or like there's other things behind the door that's happening that he himself maybe could have laughed it off, but it's like, I really don't like it. Or, you know what I'm saying? Some people laugh even in anger, like, or they're smiling even though they're very angry, and that's very dangerous for them. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, oh, for Will though, I think it was one of those things like you laugh at the joke, but then like it hits you kind of a thing, and you look and you also see like, I'm registering this the right way that I heard it. And it's like, you know what? This ain't that gosh darn funny. Like, you know what? I need to handle this. And there is underlying conversations that are in his book. And again, all the things branding wise, you work for his book, bestseller, goes out to Will. You know, Will Smith is a brand unto himself, let alone him and his wife. It's another layer of branding and such. So now it's like you got, and then of course this is his night. This is his night. Years upon years upon years working towards a thing to, you know, getting a certain level of status and achievement and all this now, whatever. So now it's like this spousal support mode comes in. And again, in talking with friends and creators, do you, as the male, respond or not? How well do you hold it together, or what do you do? My opinion was Will felt like he needed to move, get some furniture moving around. But I disagree with him acting on how he actually felt in that moment, in that way. And my thinking was, after I thought about it, was there's other ways to physically show your disapproval in that way that's put you in a power position, instead of, you know, diminishing and tarnishing that in that specific instance with that specific grouping. Being that if he saw that like I want to show that I'm in disagreement to this, is stand up, fix your suit, and look, you know what I'm saying, with the look. Everybody grew up in, most households, you just grew up in blacks, you grew up with the look, the mama look, the auntie look, the grandma look. You don't play. They cut your look in church. You know what that meant. No words have been spoken, right? So everybody understands that look. So cut the look, adjust yourself and be like, or even the pointing would have been severe enough without saying anything, and then sit back down, because everybody been like, oh, you would have even heard the crowd, because, you know what I'm saying, emotionally, physically doing something like that, I think would have done something. The other thing that I thought about was, if he wanted to show his protection of her, if you want to stand, if you want to go for the gold at that point, stand in front of her. with your hands folded in front. Take the protector pose. Like, don't say nothing about her. If you got something to say it to me, and not utter a word. And then when the moment's over, you sit back down and maybe hold her hand or something, or put your chair in front of hers, and then sit down. And then same pose. Say it to me. If you got something to say it to me. Anybody that's been in a situation where you had to make that position known without putting your hands on that person, and I can say I have done that. It's a very powerful position in that moment, because I don't have to touch you to let you know that who's behind me I stand for in this moment, and you're going to have to come through me to get to that person. Good luck. So it's like stuff like that, but you don't expect, and we put these celebrities on a pedestal, and we shouldn't. And there's so many other things in the Black community of when you reach a certain level that you just can't go over that level, that, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're supposed to hold it together. It reminds me of something I remember, even just once Aretha Franklin passed, how you go through this. I don't care if YouTube, real estate, modeling, acting, singing, directing, like, it doesn't matter. When you get to some level of success or stature, it's like when you're Black, you have a responsibility get put on your shoulders, like by default, of who you are, how you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to respond, and what you don't do to look bad for your family, and what you do or do not do to look bad on your culture and your people. And Aretha Franklin talked about this a lot. Certain things that you just don't do. She had that mama look, that auntie look that was like, you better watch it. Like, okay, now, anybody's ever heard that? All right, now, you know what that meant. So as from a brand's standpoint, it's like a half of a second of a thought that you have to think through these moments, like, and decide, am I going over that line, or am I going to hold the line? You know what I'm saying? And I feel like Will got to a point. I don't feel like Chris Rock, all on its own, that situation and that statement wasn't enough to warrant that. I think it was a culmination of a ton of other stuff that we can't see, and things that we have seen with them, Will and Jada, that now made Chris respond in a certain way. And at that point, made him go over the line. So the other aspect of, like, as a creator, what I think this exposes as entrepreneurs, creators, and stuff like that, you're building and establishing a brand. It's not that cancel culture isn't real, but I love the statement that I first heard from the pastor Mike Todd, that trust is lost in buckets and earned back in drops. Trust is lost in buckets and earned back in drops. That statement is very important to, I think, even still, not just for you yourself, or you with the spouse, or you in certain situations, or with brands or companies or whatever, or with your customers, like establishing trust in that way, but who you are, your image, and how you hold yourself together, or how you are seen. And not just how you are seen, but how you are. And for a lot of people, a lot of trust was lost when he made that action and the actions thereafterward. The whole event lost in buckets. And for some people, they don't want the drops back. The drops are evaporating faster than they can accumulate. And for others, they don't, it doesn't impact the way they feel about them. For me, I got my own personal feelings about, you know what I'm saying, like that. And obviously I'm trying to express some of these here. But I think from a brand standpoint, it's like you put yourself in that moment, like, what would I do? And nobody really knows what they would do, but you know what you would hope that you would do. And I can definitely say in my personal life experience, there's been moments where ask me that question, or ask me a scenario, a hypothetical scenario, and you say, what would you do? I now change that to, I would hope that in that moment, I hold the line. That all of your years of restraint, all of his 50 years of brand building and all the things that he worked so hard for and will continue to work for, you know what I'm saying? Like, is it worth letting go? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just letting it fall in the trash. You know what I'm saying? And like, the whole conversation is not what his success of last night makes possible, but this conversation and so many others like it. But I want to take it specifically like from a creator situation. And then like, again, like the whole weight of you yourself and your brand. And it's not that he won't ever work again. It's not that his money will, you know what I'm saying, diminish in a way that he'll go broke or something. And who knows, who can predict the future, but I don't think it will, you know, obviously. Worse has happened with other people and such. But I just think like of all people, this is not who we would have expected a situation to come from, which again, how long before you keep pushing that's that quiet kid in the classroom that eventually pops and roundhouse on somebody. And, you know, it's just like, and like, oh, dang, I know they could get that angry. Leave people alone. You won't have to find out. And so it's all these cute sayings about like F around and find out. And then somebody do it and he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you meant it. So I think though, from a brand standpoint though, and just like in how we build our own brands, these moments are coming. What happens today when you do get on a stage or you do like you do a live stream? And I think that's one of the things that keeps a lot of people from doing live content, especially like on YouTube. And I'll see this in the DMs. People are like, oh man, I'm just scared of what people are going to say or whatever. These people aren't even in your face. It's somebody that I categorize as a keyboard coward. But what happens when they show up in person? For those that's bad enough to do it. Now, I am a creator, an entrepreneur, and a human being that would say, if you're not physically being put in danger or in a situation, hold the line. My spirit man, however, is not as saved and sanctified. Is not my, you know what I'm saying? Like, in those have been those moments in corporate America. Oh my gosh. And like for myself, you know, for other coworkers that I used to have, it's very volatile moments and somebody grabs you in the heat of a thought and it's just like, come with me now. And you follow them because you know if you follow what you're thinking, it's going to be a much bigger problem. I've done that for people. I've had it done for me. So, but in that moment where you are literally out in the sea of things by yourself, how are you going to handle that? And thankfully, I can say thus far, been able to hold the line. But I got a question recently that I'm going to be making a video around in a different way. But it honestly is just like when you get these comments, people saying stuff, and it does cut. It does go deeper. Now what? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you deal with that? Because a lot of people just stop posting and they just stop showing up, but not just on YouTube, but in other ways too. It's not only pricking people's conscience, but it's impacting their consciousness around who they are, what they can become or do, and how they show up, and just what they believe to be possible for themselves. So it's a lot of growing rhino skin, if you will, when you decide to go through the jungle. But at some point, rhinos bleed. They get wounded. And I feel like this whole situation with Will Smith is like, bro man got a lot of scars for a lot of years, for a lot of stuff. That was just the last one that just stung a little too much. And it's just like, so that I don't even think that was about Chris Rock. I think that was, which is other stuff that people say trying to find reasons, but like, oh, it could have been this. That's still not enough. Still not enough. I think it's a bunch of other things that may come out later that may never. However, I think when you are put in these situations, like I was thinking about because I got sick right after coming home from social media marketing world. It's a fantastic event. One of my big life creator goals at this, at this moment that was realized, a real life dream and goal that's been realized to the point I've checked off so many things that I've wanted to do. You are forced to dream much bigger than you thought. Like, again, I'm expecting God to move in a way that I cannot imagine, but that I'm making room for. You know what I'm saying? So in one of those ways. And so I was talking about this with Doc, because Doc Rock was there. We talked about this. And it's like, what would you do if somebody say something? And I am always just simply be based on the nature of how you got to handle stuff on your channel, and like as a woman and being Black and just all of these things, and you're in a male dominated space, how you have to show up, how you have to be in the toughest moments that are just so if somebody says something or attacks you verbally or start, and like, you gotta hold the line. So every time I get on stage, every time I'm live, every time I'm posting content, I mentally like have that what to do if, SHTF manual of things as a creator and being a woman. And like, there's so many things from sexual assault to again, verbal assault, somebody, what if, what if on top of what ifs, and what do you do when? And I think that's also why it's good to have good people around you and good mentors and coaches to guide you through the toughest and some of the best moments in your life. And I love what Denzel said, because they're very close. And I'm going to pull this up exactly, because I don't want to mess this up. So I didn't think about it, but I want to share what he said when Will Smith had this whole thing, and it was Will Smith, Denzel Washington, and Tyler Perry for a moment, and to the effect of, like, be careful. It said, this is what Denzel Washington said: at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. At your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. And it's so profound, because so much of, like, that is true for any and everybody. We'll work this butt off. 50 something years of life, and who know how many years of a career, putting in work, at least a good 40, to have this one of his highest moments tarnished. And that's not to say, to clarify, that like Chris Rock was the devil or no stuff like that, but that situations and scenarios come at you when you least expect it. I've not had one of my best or greatest moments in life that was not at some point met with opposition. Or as Leslie Odom Jr., who was in the play Hamilton, that said, when you are making one of the biggest decisions of your life, or you have these life-changing decisions come upon you, that opposition and the universe will come to ask you, are you sure? Are you sure? It makes you question and think twice and think 3 times. Just so happens, sometimes that decision ain't always good, like with Will. But I bring this up just to say, because you're gonna get comments, and it's fine. You razz somebody in the comment section or whatever, or all things in good fun or whatever. But I think we have to be very careful as creators, as entrepreneurs, as media entities. And if you aren't seeing yourself as a media entity, start thinking about yourself that way. Start thinking of your name as a brand and not just a name that your mom or grandma or auntie or cousin or somebody named you. Start thinking of yourself as a brand, as a company, as an entity, and how that entity shows up, how you show up. I think this conversation is not over, not from like what happens next with Will or whatever, but we've seen this with the Logan Pauls of the world. And how do you bounce back from decisions that you make that can tarnish your brand, that will forever follow you? And you have to rebuild back that trust in drops. And sometimes those drops evaporate faster than they can accumulate for some people, and some people you've lost for forever. And to some extent, you become okay with that. But it's just like being very, very mindful of the situations that are honestly very tarnishing to the brand. I won't say dangerous, but very tarnishing to the brand and the work that you've done and the hours that you put in and the nights that you spend up racking your brain over the what to do and what to publish. And you know what I'm saying? Like all the things. Who are you helping? Are you achieving your life's goals and mission? And for a lot of people, like, and I'll speak for myself, what we do on our YouTube channels is not just about publishing a YouTube video, quote unquote. It's about a visual representation of your life's mission in action. Sit on that for a little while. That your YouTube channel is a visual representation of your life's mission and work in action. That's how I see my content. That's how I see what I'm doing. That helping people get visible using video so that they can amplify their brand, learning to become powerful communicators using their camera is different than just one model camera brand, this whatever or whatever. My thoughts on this situation anyway. I hope that you enjoyed this particular episode. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. We're publishing this one live to Drive, and I hope that as we continue to get exposure to different situations and scenarios and the things that honestly are very challenging, that you're very mindful and very careful that you are not thinking as what your individual self would do, but what your brand would do. With that, guys, live with passion. I'll see you on the next episode of the Video Simplified podcast. If you're not already subscribed, do so. And I'll see you in the next one.